Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to Reimagined with Robin. It's very rainy over here today in New York, New Jersey area, but thank you for making us part of your day. This is definitely a big part of the day that I look forward to all the time. Reimagined with Robin is a 15-minute live conversation with a leader who's working to reinvent how we interact with the world we live in, whether it's renting physical spaces like swimming pools to running cafes and more. So I'm really thrilled to do this 3-part series during Women's History Month, March 2022, to highlight and honor women who have helped build us up. So I'm going to turn to the audience right now. Can you tell us if you've ever worked with an executive coach before? As you're all kind of responding and as those trickle in, I'm going to introduce today's speaker, Lisa Rubin, who herself is an executive coach and organizational development consultant. I met her through Chief, as she is my core guide, but we'll get into that in a little bit. She has been coaching executives for actually over 2 decades, so I'm very lucky to work with her. Prior to becoming an executive coach, she's held management positions across Bayer Consumer Care, General Foods and General Mills, and Sterling Health. So Lisa, I'm going to ask you a couple questions today. Thank you for joining us. And maybe let's get started on what attracted you to Chief.
I'm delighted to answer that question, and it's so wonderful to be here, Robin. And I'm glad that you acknowledge that I'm your core guide, because otherwise we keep that confidential. So I wouldn't have commented on that, and that's great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about this topic. And it's really easy for me to say what attracted me to Chief. It's absolutely the mission. When I first heard about Chief, understanding that the mission was to drive more women into positions of power and help them stay there, it really resonated with me from day one. As you talked about my background, first in the corporate world after getting an MBA, and then moving on to being a coach, I find myself being able to relate to many of the women who are members, having harkening back to my years as an executive, when I was the only woman on the team, the only woman in the room, maybe didn't have a peer network, mentored a lot of women, but didn't have women above me to mentor me. And so, just recognizing the power that Chief could create to accelerate change was very exciting. I should also say I was raised by a single mother, and I went to an all-girls public high school. So I had experience early in my life understanding that women could be the best at everything, if there's only women that you're working with. So I never thought there was anything a woman couldn't do, which I think helped me in my perspective in my life. And I love being able to bring that perspective forward. I'm very happy to be one of the founding guides from the first few months of Chief, and I'm celebrating my 3rd year Chief anniversary, as we call it, and to be part of this place where we can exchange different viewpoints to make everyone stronger is really a privilege.
How did you decide to be an executive coach? Because I think that story in and of itself is pretty interesting, because you didn't start off being that right away, and it's not, it doesn't seem like it's easy either.
Well, it's interesting. My path is interesting. When I went into coaching, which was in the late 90s, that wasn't really a big thing that there was. But what attracted me to coaching was I loved developing people. So you talked about my corporate jobs. I loved marketing and advertising, and I was a math major and a psychology minor, so business was sort of a natural path for me. But what I really was most fulfilled by was developing the people that worked for me and seeing them go on to be promoted or having other jobs on their own. And frankly, I couldn't figure out how to do what you do, how to have work-life balance in terms of a family and a job and a career at the same time. And I was a workaholic. I'll be the first one to say that I have recovered and have a very balanced work life now. But I really couldn't imagine how to stay on the corporate ladder without sacrificing other parts of my life. And I looked at what the work was that coaches did, enabling people to be more effective. And I saw that many coaches, at least at this time in the 90s, came out of psychology. So, maybe family practice psychologists who were taking that model and process into organizations. And I thought that there was a real opportunity for someone coming with a strategic background, with a business background, who could understand what my clients' goals are, what they need to accomplish from a business standpoint, and then what are the leadership competencies that would support that foundationally. And that's what guides all of my coaching work. And it is really the perfect career. I like to say I had my foundational years until I was 20, my workaholic years until I was almost 40, and now I have my work-life balance time in my life.
I think that's what makes it so easy to talk to you as my core guide too, because you understand all the facets of, like being an executive, or like, how to even, I don't know, you've seen everybody grow, and like every time we throw a hot topic at you, you know what to cover and how to facilitate that conversation. So I really appreciate it. And I would say like the last few years has been the first time I've ever worked with an executive coach, and it's really changed my life. And so maybe getting back to like this leads back to the question of like the core group at Chief. So like you facilitate a core group there as a core guide, and you're also one of the founding members. Can you talk about that a little bit more in depth for our audience? Like what is it like, and how are these a vital part of Chief?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about core. I think it's a brilliant concept and a very effective concept to accelerate individual and group growth. And I want to say I'm now one of over 300 experienced executive coaches that Chief has brought in,
Wow.
which is really, it's so I benefit by having this community. I was a solo practitioner, and now that's been a benefit for me also. I don't have a core group, but I do have a group of small group of guides that I can reach out to in the same way that you can with your core colleagues. So core, just to demystify it, it's like a core program. It's sort of the root, one of the roots of basic roots of Chief. When someone becomes a member, they're curated into a group of maybe about 10 women, could be 8, could be 12, that are in a similar life stage and have a similar scope of responsibility, but are otherwise very diverse. So you'll have people from all different industries, all different functions within industries, and that is curated into this core group. And then you're matched with a guide who hopefully has a compatible outlook. And there's many different kinds of approaches that are, I think, all very effective. I've learned from other guides with very different approaches. So you start as a core group, and I think, and the word guide is, I think, the perfect description. We're there not to teach necessarily or to coach even as a primary role, but rather to guide everybody's leadership journey. So very early on, each group goes through a couple of exercises to get to know each other. And then beyond that, every group takes a path of its own based on that, the individual's members' goals. And it's not just professional goals. You might talk about your career goals, your personal life goals, relationship goals, things like that. And it's up to the guide to listen for the universal themes and bring those out to find those commonalities. It's up to the guide to help establish a safe space, a room where everyone can trust each other, which usually happens really by the end of the first 2 hours. It's kind of extraordinary that the end of the first meeting, just through modeling, it's up to the guide to model trust and vulnerability, and whatever it's going to take. Usually a leader knows, if I trust in my people, they're going to trust in me. And just like that happens in an organization, it happens here. And my guess is the other thing that probably everyone listening to this conversation can relate to, we've all been parts of teams. The most effective team is the team that figures out very quickly how to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that part of core, which becomes this peer advisory brain trust, really, that we begin to add to our thinking the perspectives that we've learned to someone else from someone else. And you might come in with a hot topic that you think is very individual to you, but by bringing it up in the group and putting it into this peer coaching environment, you suddenly can hear actually 4 of the other members are challenged by the same thing in a different viewpoint, and bringing that back. The other thing about CORE, I don't know what Chief's secret sauce is to curating these groups, but it's really kind of extraordinary, just all the different kinds of diversity that are addressed. So we think in our DEI world right now, I think we all think of, we don't have gender diversity, we're all women, okay, but whether it's racial or ethnic diversity, more so cognitive diversity and roles and responsibilities, it is really a Myers-Briggs practitioner's dream for that you get people who see things different ways, making coming up with better insights. And in CORE, what Chief encourages early on is, everybody's busy. Everybody that's coming to it's like, how do you make time for a 2-hour meeting once a month? It's not easy. But so how do you measure that this is a good use of your time? Well, we measure the ROI of being a Chief member by your insights and mindset shifts. And I would venture to guess that most people at the end of every meeting feel a feeling of a deepened connection with an individual on a human level, maybe many in the group because of something that was shared, but also a mindset shift. I haven't thought of it that way before. And that's part of the magic of CORE.
And you mentioned that, like, as a coach, this is a dream for you to like be in a room with such diversity, and having like this group. So how have you reimagined the way you coach also? Because you are also an independent consultant, and you also, have time with Chief as a core guide.
I would say it's a great question. And I would say in the past, in my private practice, I really stuck mostly just to business, just sticking to business. Yes, humanity and empathy come through, but I'm very goal-directed person. That's part of my corporate persona and part of my coaching persona. So I always approached every engagement with specific goals and how are we going to measure that we accomplish them, and there's a beginning, a middle, and end. And since I've been with Chief and having a more holistic view of leadership development, where I'm encouraging members to bring their whole selves and be thinking about family and personal and long-term things, I feel like I've crossed into that realm with many of the founders I work with, some of the women clients I have, some different. It's not right for every coaching engagement. I think sometimes I have to stay just in that business lane, but I'm more open to seeing that whole. And I think another thing is, Chief provided us as guides with some really exceptional training in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And I know that has made me a better coach. Absolutely. And I bring that, I am constantly asking my clients and making sure that they are keeping a broader lens about who are they lifting up, about, what is their pipeline in succession and hiring and things like that. And I think that's just made me a better coach.
And I think it's amazing, like you covered, that you can bring your whole self to Chief. When we're in our core group with you, it's not just about our professional lives. It's about like us as individuals, our whole life, whether it's like play or personal or family or work, right? It's, we're one person, and it's hard to just address one sliver of that.
I think, authenticity is so vital to leadership. And I think, when I think back about when I started, coming out of business school in 1982, I'll age myself, okay. Like I was never one of the women that could wear a bow tie and sort of try to behave like the men. That just wasn't who I was. And I always believe everybody has their superpowers. You are where you are because of who you are. And so coaching shouldn't be about changing you. It should be about helping you to be more effective. And the more you can be yourself, all the speakers that you hear on leadership will talk about authenticity and the importance of being yourself. It's important, I should clarify, it's not therapy. I'm not a therapist. Guides aren't, and it's very different than a group therapy experience. So I don't want anyone who's not familiar with Chief to be thinking that those lines are blurred, but it's certainly a place for support and accountability and progress.
Yep, great point. Last question. I know we're kind of running out of time. How are you reimagining yourself as a leader this year?
I love this question. Also, I've been thinking about this. I try to make goals for myself the same way I encourage our core members to do that. And I'm a naturally optimistic person, but I feel like the geopolitical climate and all the loss from COVID over these last 2 years have made it really, really hard to be optimistic. So I've made it a goal for myself to reconnect with my natural optimism. I believe it's really important for all leaders to be able to see the challenges in front of them realistically. And yet I also know that being able to see possibilities is what drives change. So I think that that's a theme for me this year. And I must say the way that Chief has reimagined Women's History Month, for anyone who hasn't seen this campaign, you could look on Chief's LinkedIn posts about it, not to be thinking about women's history alone, but rather the future. What will the future be like when there are more women in power and more women in leadership? And I feel like that is part of it. If we can visualize it, it will come.
Thank you for sharing. I'm so glad to be on this journey and creating the future with you.
It's my great privilege.
Everyone stay tuned for future videos, and we'll have part 3 next time. Look forward to another representative from Chief as well.